The trading outpost on Harvest 7 was crowded that morning, filled with merchants from a dozen different worlds and the smell of strange foods cooking on open grills. Daniel Carter walked through the dusty streets with his two children beside him, their small hands gripping his worn jacket as they navigated through the crowd of aliens and humans. Their small hands gripping his worn jacket as they navigated through the crowd of aliens and humans. He had come here for simple things: feed for the animals, parts for the broken water pump, and maybe some seeds for the spring planting, if the prices were fair. His daughter Lily looked up at everything with wide, curious eyes, while his son Ben tried to appear tough and unafraid, even though he had never seen so many aliens in one place. "Stay close to me," Daniel said quietly. "This place can be confusing, and I do not want to lose either of you." The twins were only 8 years old, too young to be left alone on the farm, and too precious for Daniel to trust with anyone else since their mother, Maria, had passed away 3 years ago. He had raised them by himself ever since, learning to braid hair and cook meals and dry tears in the middle of the night when bad dreams came. A Velian merchant tried to sell Daniel a piece of equipment he did not need, and a Corthan trader shouted about the quality of her livestock feed. Daniel bought what he needed and was about to leave when a sound caught his attention. The sharp crack of a whip, followed by a cry that was not quite human but was filled with unmistakable pain. "What was that?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. Ben's jaw tightened, and he looked toward the sound with anger already building in his young eyes. Daniel knew he should walk away because this was not his business and he had his children to think about. But something made him move toward the sound instead of away from it. Behind the main market square, there was a raised platform, surrounded by a crowd of aliens. And Daniel realized with a sinking feeling that he was looking at a slave auction. Most species in the galaxy considered this legal: the buying and selling of beings who were deemed defective or who owed debts they could not pay. Humans had laws against it in their own territories. But Harvest 7 was a frontier world where different rules often applied. "Dad, we should go," Ben whispered. But none of them moved. On the platform stood a creature unlike anything Daniel had ever seen up close. A Drakari female with scales that shimmered between deep purple and midnight blue. She stood nearly 8 feet tall with wings folded tight against her back, and her golden eyes held an intelligence and sorrow that made Daniel's heart ache. She was magnificent and broken at the same time. Her proud head bowed low, and her clawed hands bound with energy chains. The auctioneer, a fat Velian named Grax, was shouting to the crowd about the merchandise. "This Drakari female is 200 years old, young and strong, capable of heavy labor and basic domestic work," Grax announced. "However, buyers should be aware of her defect. She is completely barren and cannot produce eggs." A murmur went through the crowd, and Daniel saw several potential buyers turn away with disgust. "She has been rejected by 3 different Drakari clans," Grax continued. "Her own people do not want her because she cannot continue their bloodlines. But she is still useful for work if you do not mind owning damaged goods." The Drakari female, whose name Daniel would later learn was Valara, stood completely still as her worth was announced to be nothing. "Dad," Lily said, and Daniel looked down to see tears streaming down his daughter's face. "Why are they being so mean to her?" "She looks so sad," Ben added, and for once his tough act had crumbled completely. Daniel watched as the bidding began and stalled almost immediately because no one wanted to pay much for a dragon who could not breed. The numbers called out were insultingly low, the kind of prices one might pay for broken machinery or an animal past its working years. Valara did not react to any of it, standing frozen like she had simply stopped existing inside her own body. Daniel thought about the credits in his pocket, money he needed for farm supplies to get through the coming winter, money that would keep his children fed and warm when the cold months Arrived, he thought about Maria and what she would say if she were standing beside him right now. He thought about the lessons he tried to teach Lily and Ben every single day. Lessons about kindness and courage, and doing what was right, even when it was hard. 100 credits. The current highest bidder called out. A Corthan who probably wanted Valara for mining work in dangerous conditions. The auctioneer looked disappointed and asked if anyone would bid. Higher. Daniel raised his hand before he could stop himself. 200 credits, he said, and his voice carried across the suddenly quiet crowd. Every alien in the area turned to stare at the human farmer who had just bid on a Drakari. Famalagrax laughed and pointed at Daniel like he was watching a very funny joke. The human bids 200. Does anyone wish to outbid the human? No one did, because no one else saw any value in what was being sold to the human, Grax declared. Still chuckling at what he considered foolishness, Daniel walked forward to complete the transaction, his children following close behind him with their eyes fixed on Valari. Signed the ownership documents that made him legally responsible for her under Galactic trade law. Grax handed him a control collar, a device designed to deliver pain if the wearer disobeyed commands. Daniel looked at the collar for a long moment, then handed it back to the confused merchant. I will not be needing this, Daniel said simply. He approached Valara slowly, the way he might approach a frightened animal on his farm. With patience and calm, and no sudden movements, she watched him with those golden eyes, waiting for the cruelty that always came, waiting for the chains and the orders and the reminder that she was worthless. Instead, Daniel reached out and deactivated the energy bonds around her wrists. My name is Daniel, he said in a gentle voice. These are my children, Lily and Ben, and you are coming home with us. Valara stared at him without understanding. Not as property, Daniel continued, and he managed a small smile. As family. The word hung in the air between them. Strange and impossible and terrifying. Valar had lived for 2 centuries, and no one had ever offered her anything without expecting something in return. No one had ever looked at her with kindness instead of disappointment. I do not understand, she finally said, her voice rough from disuse. What do you want from me? Lily stepped forward and took one of Valara's massive clawed hands in her tiny human fingers. We just want you to come home, the little girl said. You looked really sad, and nobody should be that sad. Ben nodded firmly and added, we have a farm, and it is pretty nice, and Dad makes good food even if he burns the bread sometimes. Daniel laughed softly at his son's honest Velar, looked down at the small human child holding her hand, at the boy standing protectively beside his sister, at the man who had just spent money he could not afford to buy her freedom. She did not know what family meant, not really, because her own blood relatives had thrown her away like garbage, but something in her chest that had been frozen for decades began to crack, and she found herself nodding slowly. I will come with you, she said quietly. Though I still do not understand why you would do this. Daniel turned and began walking back toward his transport vehicle, trusting that she would follow. You do not have to understand right now, he called back over his shoulder. You just have to know that you are safe. Valara took her first steps toward a life she never imagined possible, following a human farmer and his children away from the place where she had been sold like broken equipment. She did not know what waited for her on their farm, but for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something that might have been hope. The Carter farm sat on a wide stretch of land where golden grain grew tall in the summer and snow covered everything in soft white blankets during winter. It was a modest place with a sturdy farmhouse, a large red barn, and fields that stretched toward distant purple mountains. Daniel had built most of it himself after settling on Harvest 10 years ago, and every corner held memories of the life he had shared with Maria before she got sick. Valara stood at the edge of the property on her first night and refused to come. Inside, Daniel had offered her a warm bed in the barn or even a room in the house. But she would not accept anything. "I will sleep out here," she said firmly, her golden eyes watching him with suspicion. "I do not trust walls and closed spaces." Daniel wanted to argue, but he understood that trust could not be forced. So he simply nodded and brought her a blanket, even though she probably did not need it with her thick scales. "The offer stands. Whenever you change your mind," he said before going back inside. For the first week, Valara barely ate and spoke even less. She watched the family from a distance, like she was waiting for the trick to reveal itself, waiting for Daniel to show his true intentions. Every kindness confused her, and every smile made her flinch, because in her experience, good things always came with terrible prices. Lily was the first to break through the invisible wall Valara had built around herself. The little girl would come outside every morning with flowers picked from the garden and drawings she had made the night before. "This one is you," Lily explained one day, holding up a picture of a purple dragon surrounded by yellow stars. "I made your scales really pretty because they are really pretty." Valara did not know how to respond to compliments, so she just stared at the paper. "You can keep it," Lily added, placing the drawing carefully on a rock near where Valara sat. "I made it for you." Then the child would skip away back to the house, leaving Valara alone with feelings she could not name. Ben approached differently than his sister. Less open, but just as persistent. He would bring his lunch outside and sit near Valara without speaking, just eating his sandwich and looking at the clouds. One day, he pulled out a second sandwich from his bag and placed it beside her. "Dad made extra," Ben said casually. "You should eat it so it does not go to waste." Valara knew the boy was lying, because she had watched Daniel make exactly enough food for 3 people that morning. But she ate the sandwich anyway because her stomach was empty, and because refusing a gift from a child felt wrong, even to someone as broken as her. Days turned into weeks, and Valara found herself looking forward to Lily's morning visits and Ben's quiet companionship. During lunch, she began answering when they asked her questions. Short responses at first, but growing longer as her suspicions slowly faded. "Why did your family send you away?" Lily asked one afternoon with the innocent bluntness of children. Valara was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Among my people, a female's worth is measured by the eggs she can produce," Valara explained. "Strong children mean a strong bloodline, and a strong bloodline means power and respect." "But you cannot have eggs?" Lily asked. "No, I cannot," Valara confirmed. "My body does not work the way it should, and that makes me worthless in the eyes of every Drakari clan in the galaxy." Ben frowned at this and crossed his arms. "That is stupid," he declared firmly. "You are not worthless just because you cannot have babies. My people would disagree with you," Valara said with something that might have been a sad smile. That evening, Daniel found Valara sitting alone near the barn, and he brought her a cup of warm tea, even though he did not know if Drakari could drink such things. "The children told me about your conversation today," Daniel said, sitting down on an old wooden crate nearby. "I hope their questions did not upset you." "They are curious," Valara replied. "It is not a bad thing." Daniel nodded and was quiet for a while, just watching the stars come out one by one. "My wife Maria died 3 years ago," he said eventually. "A sickness that spread too fast for the doctors to stop. And suddenly, I was alone with 2 small children who did not understand why their mother was not coming back." Valara turned to look at him, surprised that he was sharing something so personal. "Many people told me I should send Lily and Ben to live with relatives," Daniel continued. "They said a single father could not raise twins on a frontier planet. That I was being selfish by trying to keep them." "But you did not send them away," Valara said. "No. I did not, Daniel agreed, because humans do not measure the value of our families by what is easy or practical. We measure it by love. He looked at her then with kindness that still made her uncomfortable. You are not worthless. Valara, he said quietly, not here, not with us. And I hope someday you will believe that. Valara did not respond because her throat had grown tight, and she did not trust her voice. The real breakthrough came on a night when thunder shook the sky and lightning painted the darkness in flashes of white. Daniel woke to the sound of screaming and ran to the children's room to find Ben sitting up in bed. But Lily gone. She ran outside, Ben said frantically. The thunder scared her, and she just ran. Daniel rushed to the door and saw his daughter standing in the middle of the yard, sobbing and shaking as rain poured down on her small body. The thunder sounded like the machines that had filled the hospital the night Maria died. And Lily was trapped in a memory that was too big for her 8-year-old mind before Daniel could reach her. A shadow moved across the yard. Valara wrapped her wing around Lily like a protective shield, blocking the rain and muffling the terrible sounds of the storm. You are safe, little one, Valara said softly, her voice gentle in a way Daniel had never heard before. I am here, and nothing will hurt you. Lily clung to Valara's neck and cried until she had no tears left. Then Valara carried her inside, and the little girl fell asleep against the dragon's warm chest like it was the safest place in the world. Daniel watched from the doorway with tears in his own eyes. Thank you, he whispered. Valara looked down at the sleeping child in her arms and felt something shift inside her heart. Something that had been locked away for 200 years. She needed someone. Valara replied simply. From that night forward, everything changed. Valara moved into the barn at first and then into a room Daniel modified to fit her larger body. She started helping around the farm, not because anyone ordered her to, but because she wanted to be useful. Because she wanted to contribute to the family that had taken her in. She discovered that she loved working in the garden, feeling the soil between her claws and watching green things grow under her care. She learned to cook human food with Daniel, laughing at her own mistakes when she burned things or added too much salt. She braided Lily's hair every morning, using techniques passed down through generations of Drakari females, creating beautiful patterns that made the little girl squeal with delight. She helped Ben with his studies, reading his school assignments and answering his endless questions about the galaxy. Beyond their small farm at night, the family would gather in the living room, and Valara would tell stories about distant stars while Lily and Ben listened with wonder. Daniel would sit nearby with a cup of tea, watching his children bond with the dragon, who had become so much more than a rescued stranger. One evening, Ben fell asleep against Valara's side while she read from his favorite book. His small body was warm against her scales, and his breathing was slow and peaceful. Lily had already drifted off with her head in Valara's lap, her fingers curled around the fold of the dragon's wing. Daniel stood in the doorway and smiled at the sight. Valara looked up and met his eyes, and for the first time since arriving at the farm, she smiled back. A real smile that reached her golden eyes. She still did not fully understand why this human family had chosen her, but she was beginning to believe that maybe she did not need to understand. Maybe she just needed to accept that she had finally found the place where she belonged. 3 months had passed since Daniel brought Valara home from the auction, and the farm had never been more alive. The fields were thriving under her care because Drakari had a natural connection to growing things that humans could never match. The animals had grown fat and healthy. The farmhouse was always filled with laughter, and even the cold winter days felt warm when the family gathered together. Vela woke each morning feeling something she had never experienced in her 2 centuries of life. A sense of belonging that filled the empty places in her heart. She would braid Lily's hair while the girl chattered about her dreams from the night before. She would quiz Ben on his school lessons while he pretended to be annoyed but secretly loved the attention she would work beside Daniel in the fields, learning the rhythm of the farm and sharing stories about her own world that made him shake his head in wonder. The evenings were the best part, when they would all sit together and just be a familiar. Valera had stopped waiting for the cruelty to come, because she had finally accepted that these humans were exactly what they appeared to be. Kind people who had opened their home to a stranger for no reason other than compassion. She had stopped thinking of herself as worthless, because every day the children reminded her how much she mattered to them. Then the ship came. It descended from the sky like a dark cloud, blocking out the morning sun and casting a shadow over the farm that made Valara's blood run cold. She knew that ship because she had seen others like it in her youth. A Drakari warship built for power and intimidation. "Dad, what is that?" Ben asked, his voice tight with fear as he pressed close to his father. Daniel put his hand on his son's shoulder and watched the ship land in the field beyond the farmhouse. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. "Both of you." But Valara already knew who had come and why. The ship's door opened and a group of Drakari warriors emerged, their scales gleaming in the sunlight and their eyes scanning the property with cold efficiency. Behind them walked an older Drakari, male with silver scales and eyes that burned like molten gold. He carried himself with the authority of someone who had never been denied anything in his long life. "Elder Cirith," Valara whispered, and the name tasted like ash in her mouth. Daniel glanced at her with concern, but did not ask questions, instead stepping forward to meet the arriving aliens. "This is private property," Daniel said calmly. "You did not ask permission to land here." Cirith looked at the human farmer with amusement, like a giant examining an insect that had dared to speak. "I do not need permission from humans," Cirith replied, his voice deep and resonant. "I am here for what belongs to my clan." His golden eyes moved past Daniel to fix on Valara, who stood frozen near the farmhouse door with Lily clinging to her leg. "There you are," Cirith said. "You have led us on quite a chase across 3 star systems. But this game ends now. She is not going anywhere with you," Daniel said firmly, placing himself directly between the elder and Valara. The Drakari warriors shifted, their hands moving toward weapons, but Cirith raised a claw to stop them. "You misunderstand the situation." "Human," Cirith said with a cold smile. "I have tracked the property of my clan across the galaxy, and I am here to retrieve it." "Valara is not property," Daniel responded. "I bought her freedom at the auction and freed her the same day." Cirith laughed at this, a harsh sound that echoed across the farm. "You cannot free what was never meant to be free," the elder said. "Valara is from a noble bloodline, and despite her defects she remains connected to our clan. Her continued existence outside our control is an embarrassment that cannot be tolerated." Valara finally found her voice. Though it shook with old fears she thought she had overcome. "I left because you threw me away," she said. "You sold me to the traders yourself because I could not give you the children you demanded. A mistake that has since been reconsidered," Cirith replied dismissively. "Your bloodline is valuable even if your body is not. We cannot have you wandering the galaxy bringing shame upon our house." He turned back to Daniel with an expression of practiced patience. "I am prepared to be reasonable," Cirith continued. "Return my property, and I will reward you generously. Enough credits to buy 10 farms on this miserable planet." Daniel did not even blink. "She is not for sale," he said simply. "You paid 200 credits for her," Cirith pressed. "I am offering you wealth beyond anything a human farmer could dream of. Surely you can see the logic in accepting." "I see a man who threw away his own family and now wants her back only because her freedom makes him look bad," Daniel replied. "The answer is no." Cirith's expression hardened and the amused tolerance vanished from his face. You would defy a Drakari elder for the sake of a barren female who cannot even produce eggs? He demanded. I would defy anyone for the sake of my family, Daniel answered. And Valara is family now. The words hung in the air. And Valara felt tears prick her eyes, even as fear gripped her heart. No one had ever stood up for her before. No one had ever called her family and meant it. But Cirith was old and powerful and had brought warriors who could kill everyone on this farm without breaking a sweat. Dad, Lily said in a small voice, stepping out from behind Valara. The scary man cannot take her, right? Ben moved to stand beside his sister, his young face set with determination that would have been impressive on someone twice his age. Valara is our family now, Ben declared loudly. And family does not sell each other. We love her, Lily added, her small hand finding Valara's massive claw and holding tight. You cannot have her. Cirith stared at the human children like he was seeing something impossible. In all his centuries of life, he had never seen beings so small-faced danger so bravely. And certainly never for someone who was considered worthless by galactic standards. This is madness, Cirith muttered. You would risk your lives for a defective Drakari? She is not defective, Daniel said firmly. And yes, we would. The standoff stretched for a long moment as Cirith calculated his options. He could take Valara by force. But killing humans on their own planet would create complications even for someone of his status. The Galactic Trade Council frowned upon violence against species in their own territory. And reports of a Drakari elder slaughtering a human family would bring unwanted attention. I will give you time to reconsider, Cirith finally said through clenched fangs. But know this, human. I will return with the full authority of the Trade Council behind me. And when I do, there will be no mercy. He turned and walked back toward his ship, his warriors following with disappointed looks on their faces. Daniel watched them go without moving until the ship had risen into the sky and vanished. Among the clouds only, then did he let out the breath he had been holding. Valara was shaking as she sank to her knees in the dirt, overwhelmed by what had just happened. You could have taken the money, she whispered. You could have been wealthy. Daniel knelt beside her and put a hand on her shoulder. I was already wealthy, he said quietly. The moment my children smiled at you, I had everything I needed. That night, Daniel contacted the Colonial Administration Office and began the process of legally adopting Valara under human law. It took hours of forms and arguments and fees he could barely afford. But by morning, Valara was officially Valara Carter, a citizen of the human colony with full rights that even the Drakari could not easily dismiss. When Daniel showed her the documents with her new name, Valara wept for the first time in a century. I do not know how to thank you, she managed to say between sobs. You do not have to thank us, Lily said, hugging her tightly. You are our family, Ben added. Joining the embrace, Daniel put his arms around all of them and held on. Welcome home. Valara Carter, he said softly, and for the first time in her long life, Valara truly understood what those words meant. 2 weeks had passed since Elder Cirith's visit, and the Carter farm had changed in subtle but important ways. Daniel had reinforced the cellar beneath the farmhouse, turning it into a safe room where the children could hide if danger came, had contacted the colonial authorities to report what happened. But Harvest 7 was a frontier world with limited resources, and they could only promise to look into the matter. Valara helped where she could, using her knowledge of Drakari tactics to identify vulnerable points around the property. She did not want to believe her former clan would resort to violence. But she also knew that Cirith was not accustomed to being told no. They have been watching us, she told Daniel one evening as they stood on the porch looking at the stars. I have seen drones near the mountain ridge at least 3 times this week. Daniel nodded grimly because he had noticed them too. Whatever happens, he said quietly, we face it together. The attack came on a moonless night when darkness swallowed the farm and even the stars seemed dim. Valara woke to the sound of footsteps that did not belong. Too heavy and too careful to be any creature native to this world, she was on her feet in seconds, her golden eyes adjusting to the darkness as her ears tracked the movement outside. "Daniel," she called out. Keeping her voice low but urgent, he appeared in the hallway with his hunting rifle already in his hands. An old Earth weapon that fired solid projectiles instead of energy beams. It was primitive by galactic standards, but deadly enough at close range. "Get the children to the cellar," Daniel said. His face calm, despite the fear in his eyes. Valara ran to the twins' room and found them already awake, clutching each other in the darkness. "We need to go," she whispered, scooping them both into her arms with ease. "Remember what your father taught you about the safe room?" Lily nodded with tears streaming down her face while Ben bit his lip to keep from crying. Valara carried them through the house and down the stairs to the reinforced cellar, placing them gently inside the small space Daniel had prepared. "Stay here and do not come out, no matter what you hear," Valara instructed. "Your father and I will protect you. Please do not let them hurt Dad," Ben said. His voice cracking, Valara touched his face gently with one claw. "I will protect him with my life," she promised. "Now be brave for your sister." She sealed the cellar door and returned to find Daniel at the front of the house, watching shadows move across the yard through a crack in the shutters. "Mercenaries," he said quietly. "At least 8 of them. Probably Corthan, judging by their build. Sirith would not dirty his own claws," Valara said bitterly. "He hired others to do his killing. Then we give them a fight they did not expect." Daniel replied. The first attacker came through the side window in an explosion of glass and fury. Daniel fired and the mercenary fell. But 2 more followed immediately behind. They moved fast, faster than Daniel could track. But Valara was there to meet them with claws that had spent 2 centuries learning how to defend herself. She had been told her whole life that her body was worthless, that she had nothing to offer without the ability to bear children. But in this moment she discovered that her claws were sharp, her scales were strong, and her heart was full of something more powerful than any weapon she fought, like a storm made flesh, driving the attackers back with fury born from decades of pain and the desperate need to protect the family she had finally found. Daniel fought beside her, using his knowledge of the house and the land to set traps and create choke points. He had lived on this farm for 10 years, and he knew every corner, every shadow, every place where an enemy could be surprised. The mercenaries were trained killers with advanced weapons and armor, but they had expected an easy job. A farmer and a worthless dragon who would surrender without a fight. They had not expected this. Daniel took a hit to the shoulder that spun him around and dropped him to one knee. Valara screamed his name and threw herself between him and the attacker, her wing deflecting a blast that would have killed him. "Get up," she snarled at Daniel. "I did not save you from boredom on that farm just to watch you die now." Despite the pain, he laughed and forced himself back to his feet. They fought room by room, pushing the attackers back through the house and into the yard. 3 mercenaries lay unconscious or dead inside, but 5 more waited outside, regrouping for another assault. "We cannot hold them forever," Daniel panted, pressing a hand against his bleeding shoulder. "We do not need forever," Valara replied. "We just need until help arrives." Daniel had triggered the emergency beacon the moment the attack began. But response time on Harvest 7 could be anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours. One of the mercenaries managed to slip past their defenses and made for the cellar door. Valara's blood turned to ice as she realized what was happening. "Daniel!" she cried, but he was pinned down by enemy fire and could not move. The mercenary reached the cellar and began working on the lock. And through the thick door, Valara could hear Lily screaming something. Ancient and terrible awoke inside her. For 200 years her clan had told her she was worthless, that the fire in her belly was meaningless without children to pass it down to. For 200 years she had believed them and let that fire grow cold, but now her children were in danger. The children she had chosen and who had chosen her. And the fire was no longer cold. Valara opened her mouth and flames poured out like a river of golden light. The mercenary barely had time to scream before the heat consumed him. The other attackers stared in shock because intelligence reports had said this Drakari was defective, broken, unable to access the powers of her bloodline. They were wrong. Valara advanced on them, with fire curling between her fangs and murder in her golden eyes. "You came to hurt my family," she said, her voice resonating with power she had forgotten she possessed. "That was a mistake you will not live to repeat." Two mercenaries ran because they had not signed up to fight a fully powered Drakari. Remaining three tried to stand their ground and learned too late that courage without wisdom is just another way to die. When the Colonial Emergency Response Team finally arrived, they found a wounded human farmer being tended by two terrified but unharmed children. They found 6 mercenaries dead and 2 more captured, tied up with strips of torn cloth near the barn, and they found a Drakari female standing guard over all of them, her scales scorched from battle and her eyes still glowing with the remnants of fire. "What happened here?" the response team leader asked in disbelief. Daniel looked at Valara with pride shining through the pain of his injuries. "A family defended their home," he said simply. "The medics rushed to treat his wounds while the children clung to Valara and refused to let go. You saved us," Lily whispered against her chest. "You breathed fire," Ben added with awe in his voice. "That was amazing." Valara held him close and let the flames inside her settle back to warmth instead of fury. "I would burn the entire galaxy for you," she said softly. "Never doubt that." Later that night, after Daniel's wounds had been cleaned and bandaged and the children had finally fallen asleep, Valara sat beside his bed and held his hand. "You almost died," she said quietly. "But I did not," Daniel replied with a tired smile. "Thanks to you." Valara was silent for a moment before speaking words in her native tongue, words she had never thought she would say. Daniel did not understand the language, but he understood the weight behind it. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It is an oath," Valara explained. "One that my people reserve for blood relatives alone. A promise of eternal family loyalty that cannot be broken." She met his eyes with hers. "You gave me a family when I had none," she continued. "You called me Carter when my own name had become a curse. Tonight I fought for my children, and I discovered that I am not as worthless as I was taught to believe." Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "You were never worthless," he said. "You just needed someone to show you the truth." Valara nodded, and for once did not argue. The farm was damaged. The winter ahead would be hard, and she knew that Cirith would not give up easily. But as she listened to the twins breathing softly in the next room and felt Daniel's hand warm in her own, she knew that whatever came next, they would face it together as a family. The story of what happened on the Carter farm spread across the galaxy faster than light. Itself news networks from 100 worlds carried the tale of a human farmer and a Drakari outcast who defeated trained mercenaries to protect their family. Some species called it inspiring, while others called it impossible. But everyone agreed that something remarkable had occurred on the small frontier planet called Harvest 7. Within a month, the Galactic Trade Council demanded answers. Vela's birth clan had filed formal charges against Daniel Carter, accusing him of theft and illegal possession of Drakari property. They claimed that Valara had never been legally sold because a noble bloodline could not be transferred to outsiders regardless of what documents said. Daniel was summoned to the council station. To answer these charges or face severe penalties, you do not have to go, Valara said as Daniel packed a small bag for the journey. We can run somewhere they will not find us. Daniel shook his head with the calm determination that had become so familiar to her over the past months. Running is not an answer, he replied. If we run now, we will be running forever, and that is no life for the children or for you. But what if they rule against us? Valara asked, her voice breaking slightly. Daniel put down his bag and took her massive clawed hands in his small human ones. Then we will find another way, he said. But I believe in justice, even the kind that comes from aliens who do not always understand us. I have to believe that truth matters. The journey to the council station took 3 days. And when Daniel's transport ship arrived at the massive orbital platform, he was shocked by what he saw. Hundreds of human colonists from Harvest 7 had made the same trip, filling the docking bays with simple working people who had left there. Farms and shops to support a neighbor they barely knew. We heard what happened, said a woman named Clara, who ran the general store back home. We came to make sure those fancy aliens know that humans stick together. More messages arrived from across the sector. Thousands of them from humans who had heard the story and felt moved to add their voices. Daniel walked into the council chamber with Valara and the twins beside him. And he did not feel alone. The chamber was enormous. A vast circular room filled with representatives from dozens of species. Elder Saris sat with his delegation on one side, his silver scales gleaming under the lights and his expression radiating confidence. The council chair, a tall insectoid being named Arbitrator Vex, called the session to order. We are here to address the complaint filed by the Drakari clan of Sirith against the human Daniel Carter, Vex announced. The clan claims that the Drakari female known as Valara remains their property despite her sale at auction, and they demand her return. Sirith rose to speak first, his voice filling the chamber with practiced authority. This matter should be simple, he said. Valara is of noble blood, and noble blood cannot be transferred outside our species. The sale was illegal from the moment it occurred, and the human who purchased her did so without proper understanding of our laws. Furthermore, Sirith continued, the human harbored our property, despite being informed of its status and organized violence against representatives sent to retrieve what belongs to us. Justice demands that Valara be returned and the human punished. The council members murmured among themselves as Sirith sat down with a satisfied expression. Then, it was Daniel's turn. The farmer stood slowly, his shoulders still bandaged from the attack, and looked around the chamber at faces both human and alien. I am not a lawyer or a diplomat, Daniel began. I am a farmer who grows grain and raises animals on a small planet most of you have never heard of. 4 months ago, I went to a trading post to buy supplies, and I found something I did not expect. I found a person being sold, like broken equipment, because her body could not do what her people demanded. Daniel's voice grew stronger as he continued. I did not buy Valara because I wanted a servant or a worker. I bought her because my children saw a person in pain and asked me to help. I bought her because humans do not believe any thinking being should be treated as property. You call her defective because she cannot produce eggs, Daniel said, looking directly at Sirith. But in the months since she came to live with us, I have watched her teach my daughter to braid her hair and help my son with his schoolwork. I have watched her bring life back to dying gardens and face down armed attackers to protect children who are not even her own species. If that is what you call defective, then I think your definition is broken. Not her. The chamber was silent as Daniel paused to gather his thoughts. You sent mercenaries to kill us, he continued. You send armed soldiers to attack a family on their own property because you could not accept that someone you threw away found happiness without you. That is not justice, Daniel said firmly. That is cruelty wearing a legal mask. He sat down and Valara stood to speak next. For 2 centuries, she had been taught that her voice did not matter, that her opinions were worthless because she was worthless, but she had learned a different truth on that small farm. And now she would share it with the galaxy. I was born into Clan Cirith 197 years ago, Valara said. From the day of my birth, I was measured and tested to determine my value. And when it was discovered that I could not bear children, I was treated as a burden. For nearly 200 years, I was reminded every day that I was nothing, she continued. I was passed from clan to clan like unwanted furniture, until finally I was sold to traders who put me on an auction block. Then a human bought me for 200 credits and told me I was family. Valara's golden eyes swept across the chamber. In 3 months with the Carters, I received more kindness than in 2 centuries with my own people. Human children, who had no reason to care about a strange alien, chose to love me anyway. A human man who had lost his wife refused to let me become lost in my own sadness. You ask if I belong to Clan Cirith? Valara said, her voice rising. I answered that Clan Cirith abandoned me. I am Valara Carter now, and I will burn anyone who tries to take me from my family. Fire flickered briefly between her fangs, a reminder of what she had discovered during the attack. Several council members shifted nervously in their seats. Finally, the twins asked to speak. And after some debate, the council allowed it. Lily and Ben walked to the center of the chamber hand in hand. 2 small human children facing a room full of powerful aliens. We wrote a letter, Lily said, holding up a piece of paper covered in careful handwriting, because we wanted you to know why Valara belongs with us. Ben took a breath and began to read, Dear Alien Council people, our name is Lily and Ben Carter. Our mom died when we were little, and our dad has taken care of us ever since. When Valara came to live with us, we were scared at first because she is very big and has sharp claws. But then we learned that she is kind and funny, and she tells the best stories. About space, Ben continued. She braids Lily's hair every morning, and she helps me with my homework, even when I complain about it. When the bad people came to hurt us, Valara protected us. Lily read, her voice shaking slightly. She was very brave, and Dad says she saved all of our lives. We do not understand why her old family does not want her just because she cannot have babies, Ben said. It does not make sense to us because Valara is the best, and we love her very much. Please do not take our dragon aunt away. Lily finished, tears streaming down her face. She is part of our family, and we need her. The chamber was completely silent. Even Cirith seemed affected by the simple honesty of the children's words. Though he quickly hardened his expression, Arbitrator Vex consulted with the other council members for a long time before finally speaking. This council recognizes the complexity of this case, Vex announced. We must balance the traditional laws of the Drakari against the rights of sentient beings to choose their own fate. After much deliberation, we have reached a decision. Daniel held his breath and felt Valara's claw grip his hand. The Drakari practice of selling members of their species at auction is legal under current galactic trade law, Vex said. However, once sold, the purchaser has full rights to determine the fate of the purchased being. Daniel Carter purchased Valara legally and subsequently freed her, Vex continued. As a free being, Valara has the right under galactic sentient rights laws to choose her own family and residence. Furthermore, Vex added with a stern look at Cirith, the council condemns the use of mercenary forces against a civilian family. Clan Cirith will pay full reparations for the attack and is forbidden from further contact with Valara Carter without her explicit consent. This ruling establishes that no species may reclaim a member who has been legally freed and chosen a new family. Vex concluded, the complaint is dismissed. The human observers erupted in cheers, while Cirith and his delegation stormed out of the chamber in fury. Daniel pulled his children into a hug, while Valara stood nearby with tears streaming down her scaled face. We won, Lily said in disbelief. We actually won. We did, Daniel confirmed. Together, news of the ruling spread even faster than the original story, sparking debates across the galaxy about how species treated their own members who did not fit expected. Norms on dozens of worlds, beings who had been discarded for being different began. The hope that maybe they too could find families who would accept them. The Carter family returned to Harvest 7 as heroes, though Daniel insisted that nothing